It's loading. Give me a second here. Did you hit it?
Mhm.
Did it
I did.
connect the two like it has?
It should. It says live on Facebook in my top corner.
Okay, perfect. I'm just waiting for it to load. There we go. Okay, hit the record button in Zoom. And then I'm gonna mute and turn off my video. And then it's all yours. And then Katie can let everybody in.
All right.
And we
Here we
are
go.
currently live on Facebook.
There you
All
go.
right, letting everyone in.
Fantastic. Well, so glad to be here this evening, working everything out and ironing out a few of the details. Welcome to the Novi Public Library's discussion on racism. Our Talking Racism is our title, and we're talking about combating racial injustices on today's program. Glad you could be here, and if you have any questions, I ask that you type them in the chat, and we will ask questions as we go along. We will keep everyone muted and videos off during the entire process, so that'll be good. If you're on Facebook, you can type in your questions there, and we have Katie, who's also a coworker at the Novi Public Library. She will monitor the questions, and we'll see how we go, okay? I'm so happy to have our guest today. We have Dr. Kenneth Harris. He's live from Washington, D.C., actually. And we also have Commissioner Alisha Bell, and she's the Wayne County Commissioners. We're going to talk a little bit about who they are. They are our special guests, and they're going to share. Dr. Kenneth Harris is known for his innovative style and visionary approach to addressing social and economic challenges within the Black and Brown communities. He was born and raised right in Detroit, and he attended several colleges. He has degrees, bachelor's of psychology, master's in counseling and clinical psychology. He also went to Michigan State. Go Green, huh? That's right. That's right. And you are currently serving in a great capacity. You're the National Business League president and CEO. Tell us a little bit about that. Welcome to you, Dr. Harris.
Thank you so much, Gail, for having me. And it's always a distinguished honor to be on a panel with such a great leader whom I admire, Commissioner Alisha Bell, and her work over the years has just been tremendous. And we're so glad to have her. I represent the National Business League. I'm the 12th president in its 120th anniversary in terms of the founding of the organization by the legendary Booker T. Washington. We have regional offices in Detroit, Atlanta, Los Angeles, and Washington, D.C. I oversee 360 local leagues across the country, and we have over 120,000 members nationwide. And so, yes, I'm a proud Detroit native. I spent a considerable amount of my time in Detroit. I look forward to engaging a dialogue, which is really a dialogue historically that's been around for a while. But I'm so thankful for the youth, our young people, the generation that we see rising up today, who are making our ancestors so proud because they are shaking the walls of the ivory tower, and they are voicing what they would like to see their world look like in the future, not the world that we created today.
That sounds good. And Commissioner Bell, let's introduce you. Welcome for being here with us this evening. You have served quite a while. I think you've been the Wayne County Commissioner for a very long time, and that's fantastic. You were elected to the commission in November of 2002 as the youngest African-American woman to serve on a county commission in the country, and is serving your 9th two-year term. You served for 9 months in 2000, succeeding your mother, who had served in 1991. You also have a good background as well. You kind of combated against which schools you went to and what, that's very good. But you have your graduate and bachelor's degree as well. You went to Florida A&M and your master's degree in education. So welcome to as our guest as well.
Thank you so much, Gail. Thank you so much for putting this very important forum on. I think it's so very timely. And I want to also say hello to Dr. Harris. You couldn't have a better speaker than Dr. Harris on this subject matter. This is so very important. And as many of your viewers may or may not know, and I always have to let people know what is the Wayne County Commission. So those that do not know, the Wayne County Commission is the 15-member board representing all of Wayne County. We're the legislative branch of county government. There's 15 of us. We're voted on in districts. We are the ones who do the budget for the county, a $1.5 billion budget. We make laws as it pertains to the county, and we're the checks and balances of the county executive. So very important role. I'm so happy that my colleagues voted me the chair of the Wayne County Commission last year, the second woman chair in over 30 years. So it's been a fascinating year and a half, and a lot is going on. And again, this is such a timely subject matter. So thank you for bringing this to us.
Absolutely, Commissioner. And one reason I invited you, and on top of everything that you said, is I like results. I like results. And we are already talking about the problems at hand, and they are extreme. But I see recently a resolution was passed related to racism as a public health crisis. Can you talk about that? Because you played a major role in making that happen.
Absolutely, and I want to give credit to my colleagues across the country. Last year, Cook County initiated a resolution similar to this one. And about 2 months ago, my colleagues in Columbus, Ohio, Franklin County, Ohio, they put this forth. And I think when they did it this year, it really took off to other communities across the country, down over in Kalamazoo, in Washtenaw County and Oakland County. I wanted to be the first in Michigan, but those 3 counties beat me to the punch. But they did similar resolutions as well as other communities across the country. I think this is the moment. George Floyd's murder really, I think, woke up everything that was kind of under the table. It was there, but we were kind of like, status quo. We're living with it. We'll just get over it, right? But I think his death was the straw that broke the camel's back, that said, you know what, enough is enough. We're not going to take it anymore. And even though Cook County did this last year, once Franklin County did this year after the murder of George Floyd, it just took off all across the country, and communities and municipalities are realizing that racism, and we have to finally call it out, right? Racism is the root of all evil, and it is a definite crisis that we have to deal with, and it's a public health crisis when you look at Black people especially and the health conditions that we are in. It's not coincidental that most communities of color are those that have lead problems with their water or have air quality issues, making so our children have asthma. So all of those things, the root cause and problem is racism. And I think we'll talk about more as we go. But I thought it was important that we just call it as it is here in Wayne County and make it known that racism is a public health crisis, because everything stems from racism. Poverty, our criminal justice system, how long we live, all of that stems from the root cause of racism.
Dr. Harris, why do you think it took George Floyd, that incident, to bring light and open the eyes of many people?
Because enough is enough. When you look at 450 years of consistent oppression built on a mythological and in some cases created and invented concept that was purely created for a few to benefit on behest of the rest. So we know that in the late 17th century, in terms of policy, actual color was created, race was made policy, and it was made to not only have the socioeconomic control of Black people, but it was put in place for the economic welfare and benefit of a select group, what I call the white ruling class elite. And so throughout history, we can walk ourselves through, even after slavery towards emancipation. We were promised 40 acres and a mule. They burnt the acres, they kicked the mule, and then you know what? They gave us the Freedmen's Bank, which was the first Black bank created post-recreation. They shut that down, robbed the bank, and gave it to all of their corporate friends. And that's why we don't trust the banking industry till this day, because grandma put all her money and her husband's Civil War profits into that bank, and it was lost permanently. And then we walk ourselves through Jim Crow segregation, where we were forced to do business with each other by ourselves. We started to form Black Wall Streets, and even in the city of Detroit, we had Black Bottom. We formed these communities, and they ended up being burnt to the ground, terrorized, oppressed, railroads and freeways driven right through these communities. And you can walk yourself all the way through civil, no economic rights, right? 50 years later, Black people are still poor. We have no economic means or wealth created since emancipation of the same equalization. And then you look at affirmative half action, where they not only created affirmative action to give us what Nixon would call a piece of the pie or a fraction of the action, but actually civil rights and affirmative action benefited immigrants and white women more than it did the Black community. And so here we are today, after frustration, constant oppression. We know that white supremacy, racism, and privilege is a global phenomenon, but it is supported by institutions, systems, and structures. And those institutions, systems, and structures and policies are still in place today.
What do you have to say about that, Commissioner Bell? How do we move forward? What do we do next?
Right. So, I think Ken hit it on the nail when we talks about policy. I'm gonna kind of stay in that lane. That's the lane that I'm in. Policy, those policies that make it advantageous or not for people to move out of their state of being. So what I've tried to do over, my tenure as a commissioner is to institute policies to help our people get out of that hole that we have been in for decades. And before I go any further, I just want to recommend to your audience, Louis Skip Gates, a great renowned author. He has a wonderful reconstruction series on PBS. I don't know if I could talk about it or not.
Go right ahead.
Advertisement.
For sure, you're fine.
A wonderful series. I don't know if anyone has seen that, but if they have not, they should go to PBS and look at his series on Reconstruction, because it just talks about step by step how we were systematically oppressed, like you said, from after the Civil War into Jim Crow, into the civil rights, and how step by step we have just been just oppressed systematically by the policies set forth by the government. So going back to some of the things that I've done, back when I first became a commissioner, I piggybacked and had a resolution to discuss and to support Congressman John Conyers, and he had a racial profiling, and this was back in 2000, the year 2000. He had a racial profiling law that never quite made it out. I supported that racial profiling as a resolution here in Wayne County. That was 20 years ago. Fast forward to about 5 years ago. I wanted to make sure that people who are going to our criminal justice system, if they have substance abuse or if they have mental illness, that they're not going into our jails. Because as you know, that's where we have a disproportionate amount of African Americans are in our jails and prisons. So if you have a mental illness or if you have a substance abuse problem, you should be getting treatment and not going into jails. Fast forward to last year, cash bail bonds. I put forth a resolution that said, if you are going to jail because you can't afford bail, and that's the only difference in the crime. Two people, one can afford bail, one cannot, one goes to jail, one goes home. Well, that system has got to stop. We have to make it our criminal justice system fair for everyone. And then up to this year with my public health crisis and calling racism as a public health crisis, my career as a public servant has been to do the policy work to uplift our race. There's so much more, obviously, that we have to do, not just here in Wayne County and Detroit, but obviously in Michigan and across the country. But it's important that we have people elected to office who have that sensibility and understand how important it is to address these items and then work on solving them so that we can all have an equal footing to get to where we need to be. And that's just so very important.
Very good. And you mentioned racial profiling. I want to talk a little bit about that, because we think everyone knows what that is, and here or there we know the severity of it, but there are so many that don't know the severity of it. Can we talk about that a little bit, Dr. Harris?
Yeah, no question. One, I want to just mention, we have to give credence because Commissioner Bell went to an HBCU first. And
Yeah.
we don't like to downplay our HBCUs. I went to Clark Atlanta University first.
All
My
right.
PhD is in economics and Black studies from Michigan State, but I'm a proud Clark Atlanta University HBCU grad. So
All right.
HBCU.
Black colleges.
Absolutely. But also go green, go white. So that being said, as it relates to the historical narrative on policing, we have to give context. One, policing was created historically to round up the slaves and to protect white economic interest, period. So when you set that foundation and that narrative, and you look at the tremendous amounts of brutality that has been not only witnessed because of technology today, this has systemically been going on for generations, right? And it hasn't stopped. The type of policing that's going on today is because of the lack of jobs and opportunity and economic opportunities in the neighborhoods where there is high crime. And so we use the excuse of policing to monitor the community, to keep the natives at bay. And so historically, all types of oppressive means to round up folks, particularly with Black and brown skin, has always been in question. And the prison pipeline has always been existent, right? So the data, if you look at any scenario, the data suggests that where you have high unemployment, high poverty, no economic opportunities, you have high crime. Look at the amounts of budgets that is spent in these areas based on taxpayer dollars. And so I'm a proud proponent of defund the police. Why? Because I believe that not totally getting rid of the police, but getting rid of the police in the way that we see it today. Police do all types of things that have nothing to do with our public service and safety. Providing tickets and things of that nature. They go into all search warrant seizures. I mean, we could go down the list. And a commissioner may not agree with some of these things. These are just my own individual, historically based analysis and synopsis on why policing has to change for the future. It makes no excuse for you to put your knee on a man's neck. It makes no excuse for you to shoot unarmed Black men and women. It makes no excuse for any political taxpayer subsidized entity to protect corrupt policing over history. And it needs to be broken up. And so this is a day of reckoning. Young people are sick and tired of just seeing people murdered and cold-blooded right in front of your face. And in some cases, with the police officers having a smile and a smirk, like they're smiling for the camera. Right. Enough is enough, and it's a new day, and we need to shake up and disrupt this system that has oppressed Black people for too long. And this is the time that it's going to happen.
All right, and Commissioner Bell, defunding the police. I want to hear what your thoughts on that one.
So I think Ken is absolutely right, and given the historical perspective, that's so important. And you know, unfortunately, so many of our residents here in the city, the state, the country did not get that education in school. You know, I'm going to go back to the education piece. Juneteenth, for example, how many people knew about that when they were in high school, when they were in college? Not as many as should have. And that's a shame. So we have to talk about the education piece and how we got here and understanding how we got there and revamping our educational, our books and how we learn and what we learn in school, because obviously what we've learned has been terribly whitewashed to give a perspective that wasn't as accurate as it should be. So when it comes to reform with the police department, and it's semantics, I know it is, but I don't like the term defund police. I like reform the police, because obviously we need to reform just how policing is done. Defunding to me says, you know, cut the police out. We need to reform the police departments. We need to reform how we do criminal justice, how we do public safety. Yes, if we have a call that goes out to the police department, and they should have a social worker, a mental health provider, because a lot of the calls that they take on are around those issues. They're not, you know, a criminal per se, but they have other issues. So you have to have other people, I think, in the car right along with them, or get more information when those 911 calls come in to make sure you're sending the proper people out to address the issue. Again, you know, a knee on someone's neck for a $20 bill is insane. That was not the proper call, and that absolutely was not the proper action for the police to take. But it starts from training and education of police departments all the way from the top down. I know Ken will know this, that, you know, when Coleman Young ran for mayor, he ran on the platform of police reform, because back in the, you know, the 60s, they were just all white police force, and they were having havoc on African Americans here in Detroit. So he, you know, what was it? To get rid of stress, because stress was what they called the police department back then. So he ran on reforming the police department. Unfortunately, we're almost 50 years from that point, and we're still talking about reforming the police department. And, you know, at some point, things have got to change. That's why we see so many of our young people out in the streets protesting, because they said enough is enough. We've had incident after incident. We've been working on the same things for decades and nothing has changed. So I think it's so very important that we look at how we police, because if I'm in trouble and someone's trying to break in my house, I'm calling 911 and I hope the police come. I want the police come and get that bad guy. But if it's something trivial like the incident of the brother in Atlanta, he was asleep, intoxicated in his car, that absolutely should not have escalated to the point where that young man is now dead. So we've just really got to start with training. And I would say something that Congresswoman Lawrence said: you can't train a person to have a heart. You know, you can't train a person to know right from wrong and when they're inflicting deadly harm on someone where they shouldn't be. If you don't have that in your heart from the get-go, you don't need to be in the occupation of being a police officer. So we really have to train, but do some extensive looks at who we're hiring as police officers, because some things are just in your heart and you can't retrain that.
Dr. Harris, what will you say to the many who will say most of our police officers are good officers? Should we impose what you're suggesting, defunding the police?
Yeah, I mean, I work in the corporate setting, and so, you know, the quoted term of a few bad apples mean if someone embezzles $100, then the whole company goes down, right? And so all of these notions of good people and bad people, it's not about that. It's about a system. It's about an institution. It's about a structure that was founded on a white supremacist idea and ideology. And so when you think about most of these urban communities, especially where you have no residency rule, you have a high regard for outside employment of individuals who come into these urban areas, not having a relationship with the neighborhoods, not having a relationship with the communities, and you see the end result. So when you think about Ahmaud Arbery, you think about Breonna Taylor, you think about George Floyd, you think about Rashad Brooks. I mean, this is just a list of systemic issues that have been going on. And when I say defund the police, in the city of Detroit, we spend $294 million of taxpayer dollars on policing. We spend $10 million on healthcare or health issues. We spend $15 million on economic development. What does that tell you? That tells you that our priorities are totally miscued, because I can tell you as an economist, where you have good jobs, a great quality of life, you have an affordable means to live the type of life that you want to live, there are economic opportunities for entrepreneurship and small business ownership, the crime rate is extremely low. Okay? So you don't have the need for policing. So we got to get our priorities in line. We need leadership like Commissioner Bell that speaks truth to power. We can no longer have timid leadership, political leadership anymore to address these issues. We need people who are educated on the issues, who know the history, who know the development of policy that allows for police to feel like they are renegade vanguards and racist cops can get into the system and infiltrate the system, and not let off Black police officers who support and not only acknowledge, but carry on the badge of white supremacy as well. That day is over with, folks. We need a new way of living. Our children today, they want to see a world where there's equal opportunity for all. The gig is up on race, right? Everybody knows it's a created mechanism. that creates a caste system. It chooses winners and losers, and it has obviously excluded to a large degree the Black community with an anti-Black agenda. Just look at where we are in our majority Black cities, and let's look at the economic conditions of those cities. And so where you see Black leadership that actually get it, they're creating economic opportunities, they're creating small business opportunities, there are tons of jobs available, the crime rate is extremely low, and that's where we need to start aiming for the future. Police brutality will not be accepted anymore. So if we have to rearrange or reform, like Commissioner said, by defunding the police to put more efforts into what we call today health, as you see, COVID-19, African Americans were disproportionately impacted. If we spent more money in that area, maybe we could have staved off some of these things. Economic development, more than 40% of Black businesses will have shut their doors permanently because of COVID-19, based on the Wall Street Journal and the CBS News. And so with that being said, we have some serious issues to tackle. I'm looking forward to tackling. This is going to be great because we're going to give white supremacy, racism, and white privilege the exact transparency and notice that it needs.
Sounds good. Equality, I heard you mention that. Is that a possibility? Can we ever see equality, Commissioner Bell?
I think so. I talk about with my children, the Spanish flu happened 100 years ago. So I say that because every 100 years you have something that happens that transforms the way you do something, right? And I think the Spanish flu happened, it was a pandemic for 2 years. It transformed America at the time in the world. It was a pandemic. 100 years later, we're now with the COVID-19. Is transforming everything and how we live our lives. But combated with the COVID, we also have the awareness, the people realizing that now is the time that our racism, that our criminal justice system, how we live in this country is also in need of transformation. So every 100 years that happens, and I'm happy to live in a time where I think the consciousness of the nation is now finally catching up with things that we would just talk about in our own living rooms, right? With our own peers, or how bad it is out there, how the man has got us down. Now the conversations are coming to the forefront. And this is a time where we are to have that transformative change in our country. And I'm just so happy, again, as Ken said earlier, as they did in the 60s, the young people were the ones at the lunch counters doing the marches. Right here now, our young people are still the ones marching in the streets saying that we're not going to take it anymore. And it takes that youth and that exuberance that I'm trying to keep up with to make sure that we are changing the world. I have an 11 and 12-year-old, so I want to make sure that I am giving them a world when they are of age that they don't have to worry about racism anymore. They don't have to have someone watching them and following them in the stores. They don't have to have a police officer stopping them just because they're driving a nice car in a nice neighborhood. I mean, I don't want them to have that extra burden that we have to experience over our lifetimes. So I think this is the moment. This is the time. This is the moment where we are making those transformational changes to better our country and to have the equality that we all long for, that we all deserve here in America. So, and I'm happy to say that it's a movement that's being noticed across the world. When George Floyd died and we started our Black Lives Matter movement, that went around the world, not just here, but in Germany, in Dubai, in Ireland, everywhere around the world, they're saying Black Lives Matter, because for so long, we've said it under our breath, we've said it in small rooms, but now everyone knows Black Lives Matter, and we're just not going to take it anymore. And this is the time to make the change that we want to see for the next generation and beyond.
That's right.
All right. Dr. Harris, talk a little about, you're an expert with business. Talk a little bit about how Black businesses are impacted by the injustices that we see today.
Yeah, no question. And let's keep in mind too that, Black folks have always tried to enter the economic mainstream of society. We've always been relegated by policy. We've always been relegated by barriers to entry all throughout history. We can trace that going all the way back to what they called Black codes post Reconstruction, where laws were actually put in place to make sure that Black people never ever could find an economic footing in this country, while at the same time, white folks receive affirmative action, right? And they receive federal subsidy to build the type of wealth that they have today. So this whole discussion on reparations is a must. There must be a repair in our community. But in terms of Black business development, Black people story did not start with slavery, right? Economically and entrepreneurially, at one particular point in time, first of all, the cradle of civilization is founded by Black people in Africa. This is now a known factor across the world that Black people ran great civilizations, ran great economies. If it wasn't for Black people and their economic and entrepreneurial prowess, we probably wouldn't have the developments that we see today throughout history. So we came to a short glimpse in history called slavery, which was a small speed bump. And now Black people are back. And what I mean by that is Black business has grown 3 times the national rate. There are more than 2.6 million Black businesses across the country. Not only have we been going 3 times the national rate, the fastest growing segment of entrepreneurs in the entire country are Black women. Black women outnumber any other and fastest growing segment, any other race, creed, color, or sexual orientation. It doesn't matter. Why? Because they are the original entrepreneurs of this civilization, right? And so we are coming back to our own. You look like at a city like Detroit. Detroit has more than 49,000 Black-owned businesses. That's out of 62,000 businesses, period. So there are only 11,000 white businesses in the city of Detroit. 80% of all businesses, regardless of the success of Gilbert and Illich and a lot of the names that you see in mainstream media, 80% of all businesses in Detroit are Black. And guess what? You hear all these benign neglect terms like people of color and minority to describe a super majority Black entrepreneurial and economic community, which is the majority, super majority tax base in the city of Detroit. So in terms of where we were in trajectory as an entrepreneurial force throughout the country, we know that in the next 20 to 35 years, the majority of this country is going to be Black and brown. So we have to have this discussion on parity, on what diversity truly means, and diversity shouldn't be a diversion to promote white women and immigrant status over Black people. And what Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois had said back in the early Renaissance movie, during the Renaissance movie, we have to deal with what they call the Negro problem. It is still here today. The anti-Black agenda is in full effect. But guess what? Black people are still resilient and successful, and some of the most successful Black companies in the entire country are out of metropolitan Detroit, out of Black Enterprise Magazine's top 100. 26 of those companies are out of the city of Detroit. Some of the most phenomenal Black women companies now being featured all over the world come right out of the city of Detroit and metropolitan Detroit. So guess what? Black folks have got it done regardless of systemic racism. We're going to continue to get it done. But guess what? White supremacy is on its way out. The gig is up, right? Everyone knows the truth now. And this is a huge opportunity for equality. This is a huge opportunity for us to come together. And we're going to have to do it in a meaningful way. And guess what? The key to getting rid of white supremacy is economics, is entrepreneurship, is business ownership. And if we can create those type of vehicles, you not only will have our young people in the streets demanding what's right, you'll have independent minds and voices, mind, body, and soul and spirit-led freedom in terms of economics, voicing their true opinions.
You answered all of my next 5 questions, Dr. Harris. I love it though. I want to know, if you're speaking to a non-Black members of the non-Black community, what can they do to show they're in favor of Black Lives Matter, not the organization, but the cause?
Right. I think what we need to do is what we're doing right now, have the conversation, have discussion is uncomfortable, but I think it needs to be done. And it's not a warm and fuzzy conversation, but it's something that has to be done. Having the conversation with our Caucasian brothers and sisters and, you know, making them realize something that they may not have realized when it comes to privilege. You know, they may have thought that doing something was nothing to be to think about. Driving down the street, you know, getting put over by the police was nothing to them. But, you know, the anxiety that it caused some of us sometimes, especially if you're in a neighborhood where, you know, the neighborhood doesn't look like you and you're put over by the police, and the anxiety that caused, where it may just be nothing to them. So having a conversation about the things that may not automatically register as a white privilege moment, but we certainly recognize it as that because we've lived through it, you know. And I'll go back to my childhood. I live right over here on the edge of Dearborn, and so going to Dearborn to a bike shop was closer than going into the city, and we would walk over there as kids, and at that time it was mostly white. And walking down the street, we're walking down toward Warren, and a man comes out of his house and he starts hollering about us to get on out, you know, get away, go, go, go. And we're like 12 years old, like we're just walking down the street. But that was the environment, unfortunately, of Dearborn at the time. So it is having those hard conversations, because it is hard, but we need to do it. And we're not going to go any further if we don't have the hard conversations. Once we have the conversations, we, you know, white people understand us, we understand them, and we can move forward. And then we can talk about all this great economic development that Ken spoke of, about being on equal footing and making ourselves, you know, closing that wealth gap, because we know that wealth gap exists. And again, just the education of it all. How many of your audience knew that, you know, the GI Bill was something that wasn't offered to Black people who came out of World War II? You know, that was something that was supposed to be for everybody, but Blacks had a very hard time getting that. And so just from that, if you had a white gentleman from World War II who got the GI Bill, and a Black gentleman, that white gentleman got education, they got mortgages, they got a house. The Black gentleman was denied the education that came with the GI Bill. They were denied the mortgages, and they went into poverty. That right there, I mean, just those little things that caused us to be where we are today. And it was simply because of racism. So that's why we have to have those hard conversations, knowing that, you know, this just didn't happen all by itself. It was systematic, it was designed. And now that we're here, we have to understand to get ourselves out of it. But they have to have the hard conversations first, you know?
Excellent.
All right. I like that. Yeah, I agree with that one completely. Another question, how do we keep the momentum going? Give us a little bit more. Okay, we have the conversations on both sides. Who should do what to keep it to that next step and the momentum going? We march, we protest, we picket signs and more. What's the next step, and how do we keep the momentum?
Well,
Dr.
again,
Harris.
yeah, one Gail, I am so proud of this next generation of leaders, of Black and brown, the poor white class coming together to voice their dislike of the system that has been created that oppresses not just Black people, but all types of people based on gender, misogyny, you name it. This whole system built on white supremacy and capitalism in some cases, which supports it and gives it its power, is now up. How can we move forward? Look at what's being done right now because of the efforts of these young people in the community, right? They've shaken the ivory tower. So now you're actually having a real discussion. You got folks like Google, who's given $100 million. You've got Microsoft, you've got PNC. We just announced a partnership nationally with Comerica Bank. They've contributed over $1 million to ensure that there's capital access to Black-owned businesses. And they're being very intentional. They're not using these benign neglect terms like people of color, which is dismissive of Black people. They're not using minority status, because in the global context, Black and brown are the majority population in the world. Actually, white people are the minority. It's just here in the United States, we are constantly fed images of being the minority and oppressed as a minority. And you see apartheid still taking place in all of our communities because a lot of places like Michigan are still the most segregated entities in the entire country. So how do we move forward? You need leaders like Commissioner Bell, who speak truth to power, who understand policy, who's not afraid to be Black. You need white allies who realize that, you know what, I'm tired of being labeled a racist, right? Because of the silliness of my counterparts. It's absolutely stupid and silly and ignorant for people to carry on a racist ideology. We have to call it for what it is, right? Anyone that I see as racist, I can tell you their intellectual capabilities and their contributions to the world, right? It's very limited and it's very isolated and marginalized, right? So let's just call it for what it is. We need policy. Don't tell me that you support racism. Show me policy that backs it up, or show me policy that gets rid of barriers to entry, that gets rid of oppressive ways of allowing police to conduct themselves the way that they conduct themselves. That day's over with. So we need innovative minds. We need people who have educated themselves on the subject matter. I posted a whole bunch of books inside of the chat session for anyone that wants to look it up. The Invention of the White Race, right? Learn why the white race was created and for who, so that the ruling class elite could subjugate themselves over women, could subjugate themselves over skin color across the country for economic and wealth interests, period. That's what this is all about. So now Black people are focused on the economics. And I tell you, you got all types of corporations now having honest discussions. I've spoken to probably 50 or so major Fortune 500 CEOs in the last 2 weeks. I put on probably 20 or so panels and trainings along with my staff and consultants who we are going into corporations now, and they want to make sure that not only that diversity isn't a delusion, but it's true equity and inclusion, because you can have inclusion and no equity, right? You can have a head of diversity with no, it's just a puppet with all types of strings attached, with no power to make influence. And still some of these environments are very tumultuous towards Black progress. We know that out of Fortune 500 companies, to be exact, we still have very few, if not very limited, under 10 Black CEOs. It's ridiculous in the age of 2020, right? And in the age of the digital revolution. We got to get better, folks. We can't be operating like we did 150 years ago. It's actually an embarrassment to the world that a lot of other countries are much more advanced in terms of dealing with race than we are. And so I'm glad to see the partners that are stepping forward, but they just can't put lip service in place. I want to know what your board of directors look like, right? In terms of true diversity and Black inclusion, not benign neglect. Don't put someone that you can almost say that they look like they're Black and they're not. We need Black representation on your boards and your executive leadership positions and of influence. I need to see your supply chain. Who are you doing business with? Public and private sector included. I want to know, especially like a city like Detroit, where you have an 80% population, how many of those contracts based on taxpayer dollars are going back to Black people, right? And so we have to have a real discussion, both economically, politically, and we got to impact the social economic economy. But guess what? The discussion is happening. Young people keep raising hell, just like I tell my students, you know, all across when I'm teaching class, always voice your opinion, always move forward for the world that you would like to see, and shake the ivory tower up, because obviously 150 years later, we still haven't moved the needle.
Right.
Commissioner Bell, you mentioned your children. I heard Dr. Harris also talk about the young generation. What do we tell them? Is there hope? What can they do? And how do we provide hope? We are going to have a separate program talking about how you talk to your children about racism, but give us a little bit of insight about what we can provide for our young people.
You know, this is great. Our young people are out there marching and protesting, but I also need them to vote. It's important who you vote into office.
I was waiting on that word.
All of this is for naught if we don't put people in office who have our best interests at heart. The people in office make the laws that govern the corporations, the laws that govern how we get or not get whatever that is. We have to make sure that we are voting. That's how we make a difference.
Yes.
And I get so angry because, you know, in the not so distant past, we couldn't vote. I mean, and I'm saying, you know, that was not very long ago. 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, not very long ago, we couldn't vote. So now that we can, every Black person alive needs to go out and vote for somebody, but not just vote, of course, educate yourself, because just because someone looks like you don't mean they're for you. You have to make sure that you are educating yourself and then going out to the polls and voting, because that's where it all starts. If you don't have people in office who are going to set the correct policy, who understand about the inclusion, about making sure that those opportunities exist and making those opportunities exist. Again, I go back to Mayor Coleman Young. Some people loved him, some people hated him, but it was no doubt in anyone's mind that he was for his people here in Detroit and making those people wealthy, because that's what everyone else does. If you look at any other, they're making the policies to help their people reach a certain economic level. And he did not apologize for doing that. You know, look at Don Barton, look at so many other institutions here in Detroit. So who you put in office is so very important. So that's what I tell my children. Since they were old enough to walk, they would go to the polls with me. And when they got older, I let them even, you know, shrivel in a little oval because they need to see me doing it. They need to know what it looks like so that they know when they turn 18, they're going to vote. And then we tell, you know, their peers and their colleagues to do the same thing. You know, this argument over how many people are voting is so horrible when we look at some elections where there's 12%, 15%, 20%. It should be 100% of all eligible people voting. So that's what I really want to put forth. The power that we have in the polls, because who you vote for counts, it matters. And as we see right now, it has consequences. So you really have to do that. And then also, I just want to talk about, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this. With currently with the CARES dollars, Wayne County has $50 million in grants, not loans, but grants for small businesses to take advantage of if you were impacted by COVID-19. I got disturbing news today that only 1,000 people have applied, and that $50 million can go for a long way for so many more businesses. And I know businesses get distrustful of government. They see what happened at the federal level and what a scam that was. But I promise you, we have $50 million for small businesses in Wayne County. Please apply for that money, because it's for you. We know so many businesses, as Ken said, are going to not make it because of COVID. So this is a little shot in the arm to help some of you get over that hump. So please apply for that money through waynecounty.com, back to work, and get that money. Get that money, y'all, because it's there. It's not a loan, it's free. Get that money.
Commissioner Bell, is this exclusively for Wayne County?
It is exclusively for Wayne County businesses. But I will say that Macomb and Oakland have similar programs as well. So just get with your local county. Yes. So please get that money.
Dr. Harris, as I was continuing about the young people, what do you have to say in terms of how we encourage or make recommendations as how to encourage young people to proceed with injustices that are going on and make better improvements?
Gail, we don't have to encourage young people at all. We would not be having this discussion today if it was not for young people, okay? Not only have they started a global recognition of white supremacy, racism, and all its systems and structures, they are still out in the street marching today. This is the largest movement in history across the globe. You can't deny it. So we don't have to motivate young people. What we need to motivate is them people who have been sitting on their butts, right? Not doing nothing, right? And people who have been in the public and private sector who have not advocated who have not done their jobs properly, guess what? The spotlight is on you now because young people are saying enough is enough. And if you've been even a Black person or a white person in a room and you sit on a board and you have not checked into your company's policies, you have not pushed the issue on inclusion, you have not pushed the issue on equity, you have not tracked where diversity is, you need to retire or give up your seat and move out the way. It's time for you to go, right? Just because you may receive a few white privileges, right? That is not benefiting the collective, and we're tired of it. It's time for new leadership, and we need to speak truthfully and frankly for that. I'm not running for office, right? I'm an intellectual, I'm a corporate executive, I can advocate, I can shake the tree, and I can tell you we're coming straight, no chaser towards this system. It's time to dismantle white supremacy. I agree with my son's generation. My son is out in the street every single day at the age of 21. And guess what? Although I worry about his safety anytime he's around a police officer, I tell him to go do what his ancestors did. Commissioner was exactly right. They didn't like Dr. King, right? He was almost hated before he was assassinated by white people. Malcolm X, they did not like, right? Because he spoke truth to power regarding the systems and institutions and structures. And Black people all throughout history have always raised hell. Matter of fact, every other minority group, immigrant status, gender or sexuality status has benefited off the backs of Black people and our blood, sweat, and tears. There would be no civil rights if it was not for Blacks out in the street dying for the cause. So I give so much to these young people who not only know their history, because they have access to more than what's taught to them inside of our current school system. They can actually Google and read other things now, which they have access to. But we need to revamp public and private education for our children. We need to have schools that have African-American history that speaks the truth to power, right? And gives historical fact, not facts about Columbus, who did not discover America. He actually was a brutal murderous and rapist, right? So when you look at our history, it's nothing to be proud of. This country was founded on the very premise of a sin. That sin is still prevalent today. We have not dealt with the sin. We have not repented. We have not atoned to it. And until we do, we are going to continue to rise up against it until it actually dethrones itself. We look silly out here with some of the stuff that's happening, and young people can see clearly. Granddaddy, I don't agree with you on this. Why? Because you didn't get a paycheck last week. The stimulus money for your business went right over your head, right? I thought you were going to get your own tax dollars back, Granddad. You've been in business for the past 30 years and you got denied the loan at the bank. Why is that? Why did my friend Joe up in Novi get the loan before I did in the city of Detroit? So young people are asking these real questions that I think make tons of sense to folks who are realist about where we are currently. So I'm happy for our young people. I think we're in good hands.
All right. I heard you mention change. I also heard you mention repent. Do you think we can have true change at heart without confession and repentance from the non-Black community?
No, it takes, as I said earlier, it takes all of us having the hard conversations and really educating ourselves on what the history of our country is and how we are, how we got to this point. We have to have those conversations in order to move forward. I mean, this is an exciting time because we are ripe for the conversation. This is the time is now to do it and to make those changes to move forward. And had it not been, you know, unfortunately for the incidents that have happened, but it put us to this moment. So they kind of happened for a reason, because now we're at the thrust of make some real changes for all of our residents here in the country and move forward, address racism at its core. You know, why are we looking at boardrooms that still have the first this or the first that? You know, I'm the first African-American on this board, or I'm the first person elected to this office. We're still having first, which makes no sense to me. So, but it's time that we looked at that and that, again, applaud our young people who are saying we're going to stand up and we're not going to take it anymore. The same as we did in the 60s. It's time for this generation to do the same, and for us old folks now to get out the way and let them lead and do the things that's going to bring us to a prosperous new union. I mean, and it takes some realizing of the issues that have, unfortunately, they're hard, they're ugly, but it's the facts. We have to look at the facts and just acknowledge it. Don't run away from it. Acknowledge it, talk about it, and then move forward. Acknowledging that there were some wrongs done, sins were committed, and then moving forward is the only way we're going to do it. And that takes the collective of Black people, white people, Asian, Latino, everybody to be in that conversation, but especially our Caucasian brothers and sisters to understand and have some empathy for where we're coming from, understand that, and then move forward. That's what it's going to take.
What do we say to our white brothers and sisters who may be or may have been prejudiced? They come from the family, they come from the background, and they are prejudiced, and they're trying to get out of that situation, but they fear the response from the Black community. Speak on that, please.
Well, I mean, it's a conversation you're going to have. You can't go anywhere in this world without seeing a Black person or running into a Black person, right? Whether you're uncomfortable or not, whether in your secluded environments, people watch sports, right? The majority of your athletes are Black, right? People watch the inclusion happen in so many different genres, industries, and sectors. Black people are here. They're the indigenous people of this land. They've always been here in the Americas. They were the founders of this country. They helped build the White House. And we're going to be around a lot longer than what people think, regardless of the vaccines that are being created, right? And so at the end of the day, this is a truth serum for everyone. I think it's a wonderful opportunity. Like I said, my job is to make sure that CEOs are being uncomfortable, right? And that they're having the real discussion. And what I can say and acknowledge is that there are a ton of white male CEOs who are actually saying enough is enough. And they're saying, Dr. Harris, what can I do to change this? We don't know what we don't know. Can you point us in the right direction? I know this is going to be uncomfortable with my company, but guess what? We have to have it, because if you don't have a diverse company, and I'm giving economics and data now, is that diverse companies that are more diverse are economically prosperous. That is a data set that has been well researched. So companies that lack diversity won't be around in the future. Your future marketplace is a diverse marketplace. Your future consumers are Black, brown, and white, and in between. So you have to come with the current trends. America is changing. The world is browning and blackening even more every single day. It's actually happening a lot sooner than what people projected, right? Because there are more Black and brown babies born today than white babies. So that tells you the white writing is on the wall. And so this fear that is out there, it's a made up fear. There's only one human race. It's that we created this concept to really separate everyone. So the white ruling class elite, which is majority male dominated, could control everyone else. So white women, you're getting played too, right? Even though you have some privileges and some status and a nice position and a salary, you're still relegated to an oppressive and in some cases sub position in society. Immigrants, same thing. You deal with the same thing that Black people deal with on a regular basis, right? No matter if you're driving in a car, all they see is melanin, right? So you're getting pulled over and you're going to have to answer questions. The only thing that's different is your accent, right? And so when you deal with Black folks, we have to have these truths. It's going to be so much fun because I see a world that our children see, but more importantly, I won't even be around to even see them enjoy it. So let's try to create the world that they want to see, right? That doesn't have race as a deciding factor on where you go and how far you go in life. This is a day where equality is a must, and we're going to end this system. It's over with. It's a wrap. You can no longer sustain it. It's not prosperous, and it's not economically and politically feasible.
Right. Absolutely.
I was going to mention 30 seconds of closing statement. That was pretty good, Dr. Harris.
Yeah.
We're going to start. We're going to start as you
I'll give it
regroup
all.
some more. I know you can go. We're going to give Commissioner Bell 30 seconds closing statement on the subject.
Well, again, I want to thank you for initiating. Again, these are difficult conversations to have, but they're so very important. My fear is that we get caught up in the moment and we'll say and do the right things for the moment, but they won't be sustained. So we've just got to stay on this until we have equity for all. I'm glad the CEOs are doing their things, and people, I see stores down in Midtown with Black Lives Matter in the windows, but I just don't want it to be a phase. I don't want it to be something that we're just feel good about now. I want this to be substantive. I want this to be sustainable. I want this to really change and be transformational for our country, because it has been way too long. So that would be my closing statement, that we really have to stay on it as long as it takes to make sure that there is equity amongst all of us. There's nothing to fear. We're not going to, do it. There's nothing to fear. And I think fear is what's driven racism for so long. You go down to the South, and why the Ku Klux Klan were going out and hanging people, because they were fearful that Black people were becoming successful. There's enough room for us all to live together without that fear. So we want to make sure that the changes that we are going through now are changes for the long haul, and just not a cute little phase that we're going through at the moment.
Dr. Harris, last words.
Yeah, my closing statements are simple. It's time for a woman to lead. And so, Commissioner Bell, whenever you're seeking higher office, you have my support and a whole lot of other people, right? So I'm just going to leave that right there. This has been an excellent program. I applaud the Novi Public Library for having this discussion. I applaud Holly and Katie and all of the folks who made this happen, along with you, Gail. This is a meaningful discussion, and this is how we're going to move society forward together without the connotation of race, right? No more Katies blowing up the spot, right? No more police brutality in terms of putting knees on necks anymore. No more negated opportunities because we had fear of someone's skin complexion. That is really an ignorant and sick behavior. And guess what? We have to call it for what it is. So thank you, Commissioner Bell, for your leadership. I applaud Wayne County Executive Warren Evans and the tremendous amount of resources that he's put out there, along with the commissioners as well. We got work to do. And guess what? We're not afraid. There is no fear anymore. The young people have validated that.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Dr. Harris. And thank you for watching as well. We will have more programs. Our next one will take place July the 14th. It's Racism is Not a Black People Issue. We also have July the 22nd, Talking with Your Children About Racism. And Why Take a Knee will take place on July the 30th. We encourage you to log on to our website, novilibrary.org, to register for the additional programs. We hope you were fed a little bit of something that would touch your spirit, touch your heart, touch your soul, to make change and to support those who are attempting change. Thank you, Commissioner Bell. Thank you, Dr. Harris. I appreciate all of your insight on the matter, and have a good evening.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Commissioner.
All right, Dr. Harris.